Hello, everyone. Good afternoon again, and thank you for joining the Advancing Responsible Investments to Achieve Sustainable Development Goals regional event on the implementation of the ASEAN Guidelines on promoting
Recording in
responsible
progress.
investment in food, agriculture, and forestry, ASEAN RAI. We will begin shortly. Thank you. Good afternoon and a pleasant day to everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today for this regional event on the implementation of the ASEAN Guidelines on promoting responsible investment in food, agriculture, and forestry, or ASEAN RAI. Before we proceed with our program, we would like to acknowledge our event co-organizers. 1, Grow Asia. 2, the International Institute for Sustainable Development, and 3, the ASEAN Secretariat. We would also like to thank our project's donors, namely the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, and the Government of Japan through Japan-ASEAN Integration Fund. Here now to formally welcome everyone to this event is the Deputy Director General of the Department of Agricultural Research, Chair of the ASEAN Technical Working Group on Agricultural Research and Development at GARD. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Dr. Nang Ki Win.
Hello. Firstly, I would like to say, glad to meet you all. Distinguished guests, ASEAN Member State delegates, representatives from ASEAN Secretary, international and regional partners, representatives from the private sector and civil societies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the regional event on the implementation of ASEAN Guidelines on promoting responsible investment in food, agriculture, and forestry, ASEAN RAI, advancing responsible investments to achieve sustainable development goals. Myanmar is very pleased to deliver opening remarks as incumbent chairman of the ASEAN Technical Working Group on Agricultural Research and Development, ADWGARD. Please allow me to take this opportunity to express my sincere appreciation to the ASEAN Secretariat, Grow Asia, and the International Institute for Sustainable Development for organizing this important event to discuss the progress of ASEAN RAI and to highlight best practices and lessons learned by various government and private companies in implementing the ASEAN RAI. I would also like to thank the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, the Government of Japan through the Japan ASEAN Integration Fund, JAIF, and the Federal Ministry of Food and Agriculture of Germany for their continued interest and support to further advance responsible agricultural investment in ASEAN region. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to highlight that ASEAN as a region is rich in agricultural land in which the ASEAN member states are the major agricultural exporters. ASEAN is also the home of many major business and foreign companies with increasing investment up to 145% in the last 5 years. However, along with the rise in investment, we have to be aware that the threats to community, land rights, natural resource conservation, food security, and worker protection among others, remain. In 2018, the ASEAN Minister of Agriculture and Forestry, AMAF, adopted the ASEAN RAI Guidelines, which focus on promoting responsible agricultural investment in ASEAN. In the view to implement the ASEAN RAI Guideline, in 2019, the Action Plan Implementation Strategy was approved. The action plans consider of 4 activities to be implemented in 2020 and 2023, which are: number 1, national legal and policy services; number 2, learning and accreditation program; and number 3, regional and national capacity building; and lastly, number 4, investor engagement and impact management. Ladies and gentlemen, with regard to the ASEAN RAI Action Plan, I have the view that if all stakeholders move together to translate and implement this action plan, we will have a better and safer environment for the community, land rights, natural resource conservation, food security, and worker protection by the responsible investment. I also believe that with strong cooperation and coordination, we can face the inevitable challenges in the future. These collaborations should continue to an even greater extent and in more defined ways, involving all other key stakeholders from the government agency, private sectors, civil society organizations, and local communities. The cooperation should continue to function through partnerships with technical organizations, with each organization doing what it does best and taking into account the regional arrangements and facilities already in place. Ladies and gentlemen, with that note, I would like to conclude my remarks by thanking all participants for spending your precious time and sharing your valuable views and feedback to help us improve and advance the implementation of the ASEAN RAI. I hope you all have a pleasant time and fruitful discussion. Thank you for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nai Ki Wen, for giving us an overview of the food and nutrition situation in the ASEAN region. At this point, we will be conducting a poll to determine the profile of our participants. Question: who is in the room? On your screens, you will see the following choices. 1, government. 2, civil society organization or NGO. 3, private sector. 4, multilateral organization. 5, others. Please specify in the chat. If you do not fall under any of these sectors, please click others, then specify or type in your sector representation in your chat box. All right, let's see all those answers coming in. Wonderful. We're seeing the answers now. Wow, we're seeing that we're represented rather by the civil society organization for most at 40%, and we have government representatives here at 18%. The private sector are also invested in this conversation. Thank you very much. I'm seeing in the chat that we also have a freelance development consultant. Thank you. Wonderful to have everyone here and a good representation. NGOs are here too. Thank you very much, Falida. And welcome. And we are all looking forward to a very impactful session today. Thank you. As you can see, we're also flashing the housekeeping rules at the moment. I believe that the important note to make for these housekeeping rules is that we have interpretation being rendered for this event. But if you are from Thailand and would like to tune in to Thai, please do choose Spanish. It so happened that our session has that tiny bit of a glitch that the Spanish button is actually tagged to the Thai translation. So please do observe our housekeeping rules and remember to choose the Spanish if you would like to tune in to the Thai interpretation later on, especially during our breakout session. A reminder from our organizers that we have translations available for this. And contrary to what I just earlier said, thank you so much for the correction just now. There's no interpretation during the breakout, but there will be translations available. Thank you. All right, we will now proceed to hear a progress report on the project called Supporting the Implementation of the ASEAN RAI Guidelines on Promoting Responsible Investment in Food, Agriculture, and Forestry. This report will be shared by two of today's event organizers, the International Institute for Sustainable Development and Grow Asia. They will be providing updates on key areas of work undertaken over the last 2 years on this project, led by the ASEAN Secretariat, Grow Asia, and the International Institute for Sustainable Development in collaboration with the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations and other regional and national partners. Before I hand it over to our presenters, I'd like to set the stage. We know that across Southeast Asia, there is a huge opportunity for increased but responsible investment in the food, agriculture, and forestry sectors. A Bain report from 2020 showed that there is $205 billion per year in untapped, sustainable investment opportunities in these sectors alone. Yet we also know there are many perceived environmental, social, and governance risks and challenges associated with investment in these sectors. Overcoming these risks and leveraging investment opportunities requires a multi-stakeholder approach that involves the government, companies, and civil society and farmer organizations. As you saw from our poll earlier, our event captures this diversity with participants from many types of organizations. So well done for being here. Therefore, the project partners have designed a process that engages each of these stakeholder groups in specific and valuable ways. The partners are helping governments to, number one, develop national regulation. Number two, prioritize sustainability concerns. Number three, align with multilateral goals. Number four, promote innovative and green finance mechanisms. The partners are helping businesses to, number one, prepare for policy change. Number two, de-risk their agri portfolios. Number four, demonstrate ESG commitments. And number five, attract new types of financing. And the partners are helping civil society organizations to, number one, advocate from the policy to field level. Number two, facilitate investor consultations. Number three, ensure that inclusive practices are applied at local level. Number four, train communities on their rights. You'll learn more about how this project takes a stakeholder approach in our next presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, our first presenter will be Mr. Ronald Eberhard, Law Advisor from the International Institute for Sustainable Development, IISD. After Mr. Eberhard, we will be hearing from Ms. Erin Sweeney, Grow Asia's lead for sustainable investment and inclusion. So now, please give it up for Mr. Ronald Eberhard and Ms. Erin Sweeney.
Thank you very much, Ping, for the kind introduction. My name is Ronald Eberhard. I'm a law advisor with the International Institute for Sustainable Development, and I'm currently supporting ASEAN member states on the implementations of the ASEAN guidelines on promoting responsible investment in food, agriculture, and forestry sector. May we please show the slides, please? Today's presentation is meant to give a update or a progress report on the implementation of the ASEAN guidelines. As you might be aware of from the previous speakers, this project is being supported by 4 partners, which is ASEAN Secretariat, Grow Asia, ISD, and FAO. And our work is kindly and generously supported by the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, as well as Government of Japan through the Japan ASEAN Integration Fund. May we go to the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Before I start with providing the updates on the implementation, I would like to kindly explain for us that might not probably aware of the ASEAN RAI guidelines itself. And in starting this, I wanted to define the terms of responsible agriculture investment. This term refers to the investment in the agriculture sectors, which include sustainable development principles. Hence, the focus in the sector will not only about profit or the economic aspect, but also ensuring that social and environmental aspects are thoroughly considered. An ASEAN RAI guideline is developed to help achieve this responsible agriculture investment in the national framework. Hence, it requires effort at the national level by the national leaders to really implement it. We also receive a lot of questions on how exactly the guidelines will attract responsible ag investment. So I think primarily we understand that responsible ag investment is primarily determined by the enabling investment in the country. The role of strong laws and regulations is essential for creating such environment. A strong law can be an incentive for responsible ag investment and a disincentive for investment that is not sustainable. And this incentive can be achieved through financial, technical, tax, regulatory, and other measures. And by setting this incentive, states can require the investors to behave more responsibly. One important aspect about the ASEAN RAI, it remains a regional guidelines as it importantly considers how multinational cooperation currently operates. In this regard, more importantly, 80% of FDI in Southeast Asian region is coming from the region itself. So it's an intra-ASEAN member states investment. That's why setting up a regional guideline such as the ASEAN RAI is deemed as essential. Can we go to the next slide, please? So here are the 10 thematic areas of the ASEAN RAI guidelines. These 10 thematic areas are aligned with major international commitments, such as the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and as well as the CFS RAI or the Committee on World Food Security RAI principles. It is also applicable along diverse value chains, from the upstream till the downstream of the business cycle of agriculture sector. We further adapted the ASEAN RAI based on the CFS RAI by adding 3 distinct principles, which is technology and innovation, climate change and natural disaster, as well as the regional approach. And this is the first time the CFS RAI is being translated into a regional document such as the ASEAN RAI. We go to the next slide, please. A little bit of history of how this guideline is being developed. First and foremost, this guideline is developed, initiated by the ASEAN member states, and finally adopted by them as well. And during the development phase of these guidelines, series of stakeholder consultations were taken place, which finally resulted in this ASEAN RAI guidelines, which as what we have now. Further down the line in the process, we have seen that the guidelines contains high-level policy principles, which needs to be translated into a more technical and practical languages to be understood and to be implemented at the national level. Hence, in 2021, the ASEAN member states adopted what we have called the alignment assessment tool, which are helping to translate the guidelines from a high-level principle into a national technical measures, which I will explain later on at the later part of this presentation. Can we go to the next slide, please? This 10-year action plan that was adopted in 2020 was meant to help dissect the guidelines to be applicable for every stakeholders. So under the pillar 1, which is for the government officials, we meant to integrate RAI into the national policies through expert technical assistance in response to demand from member states. And under the pillar 2, which is relevant for the civil society organizations and the farm organizations, we help train a cadre of professionals to help implement the guidelines and respond to stakeholder queries for future investment. And on pillar 3, which is applicable for the private sector, we encourage the uptake of the ASEAN RAI through capacity building, through engagement with the private sector by using a metrics and indicators to measure impact. And we also built upon the existing framework to make the ASEAN RAI accessible and simpler to adopt. And on the last pillar, the pillar 4, on learning accreditation program, we are training experts, which could be on all level of stakeholders, government, civil societies, and also private sectors that can help further disseminate the knowledge and the skills needed to understand the guidelines and provide advices on how to implement it at the national level. So this is something what we have determined as an essential to transfer the knowledge from people who know the history about these guidelines and who help develop it at a more technical level so everyone we can increase the number of people who understand the guidelines and further to help the uptake of the guidelines itself. Can we go to the next slide, please? So here I will start with providing some updates on the projects on supporting the implementation of the ASEAN RAI. Next, please. So this is the first pillar, which we have happily and excitedly done with 4 ASEAN member states, which is Indonesia, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos PDR. So under this first pillar, we are trying to help improving legal and policy framework to enhance responsible and sustainable private sector investment in the FIF sector. How we do this? As I explained earlier, the ASEAN member states adopted the ASEAN RAI alignment assessment tool. So what you see right now in the slides are the activities of which Indonesia and Cambodia in these pictures are doing the alignment assessment process. The alignment assessment process are basically a due diligence process, which help a country to assess their national framework alignment with the ASEAN RAI and to address gaps where reforms might be needed at a later stage. So we divided at least for 4 phases for the due diligence process. The first phase is the inception and design. Here you can see meetings, interagency meetings in these countries are being done to further develop an institutional task force in the national level to assess their national framework with the ASEAN RAI. And then there will be the self-assessment process of which this task force will look into their own framework with the ASEAN RAI. And we have the peer-to-peer review as well, of which we'll invite other stakeholders, in this regard, other ASEAN member states and other external stakeholders to review the result of the self-assessment. With a view at the last stage, we validate it and publish it to, again, legitimize and validate the result of the due diligence process. Indonesia will share their experience so far at the breakout session number 1. So I highly encourage you to register for the breakout room number 1 to hear directly from them what they did and what is the experiences and insights out of their process. Can we go to the next slide, please? Can we just play the video? So this is the online tool for the alignment assessment process. We intended to develop this online tool to provide a user-friendly interface so anyone can access the tool anytime, anywhere. This will help us to further advocate the ASEAN RAI guidelines at every level and to make the tool accessible. And I'll provide the link to the beta version during the breakout session, so you can look at it by yourself and see how it works. And this is meant to be launched by the first week of July, which is next month. So hopefully by next month, everyone can access this online tool. Let's go to the next slide, please. So we also, under the second pillar, which is applicable for the civil societies and the farmer organization, supported efforts to improve the capacity and knowledge of ASEAN stakeholders in implementing the ASEAN RAI. In this picture, in Laupedia, a multi-stakeholder capacity development process was carried out under the coordination of the FAO on the basis of a multi-stakeholder capacity assessment to identify the needs of different sectors to the creation of such enabling environment for the RAI. This is supported by the Federal Ministry of Food and Agriculture of Germany. One of the main activities consisted in this is a learning program that are organized by civil societies for Laotian government officials. A multi-stakeholder dialogue was also organized as well with GIZ and Helvetas and co-hosted by the Ministry of Planning and Investment as well as the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry of Laupedia. And we go to the next slide, please. So we also have, under this pillar, capacity development activities with farmer organizations, cooperative, CSOs, NGOs, and academia to empower rural women and youth to engage in RAI, which were conducted in Cambodia, Laos, and the Philippines by FAO and ASEAN. A representative of ASEAN will share some interesting results of these activities during the breakout session number 3 today. I also kindly encourage you to join that breakout session as well. Next, please. This is the other activities that we did under the second pillar, which we collaborated with the ASEAN Interparliamentary Assembly. We held a webinar last year on responsible investment in FAF system. And the purpose of this webinar was to introduce the ASEAN RAI guidelines and to give ASEAN parliamentarians, the opportunity to exchange and discuss national policies and laws relevant for RAI in their countries. Looking ahead, a practical handbook will be developed for the parliamentarians to support them in their legislative agenda to further implement the ASEAN RAI. Targeted capacity development will also be delivered at the national level. I'll stop here and will kindly give the floor to Ms. Erin from Grow Asia to continue with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ronald. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today, and I'm truly enjoying looking through the participant list to see what a diverse group of partners we have from across the ASEAN region, as Ping, our host, shared from government, from civil society, and from the private sector. And it's my incredible pleasure to be here today representing the work that Grow Asia is doing in collaboration with our partners and our donors on this work. So if we could move to the first slide, please. As Ronald shared at the beginning, our 10-year vision for the ASEAN RAI implementation plan involves core stakeholder groups that are very diverse, and we want to make sure that what we're doing together with ASEAN member states by building up technical expertise and providing those direct legal services is translated to our partners in the private sector so that they can benefit from understanding what policy changes are coming down the pipeline, but also to be able to continue to improve their practices at the field level in order to hit their own sustainability commitments, to attract sustainable finance, and to align with trade and green trade requirements. So to that end, Grow Asia supports the development of case studies featuring agribusinesses and financial investors from across ASEAN in multiple ways. And if we can just click through the next few buttons, you'll see that we have 15 agribusinesses participating in this case study series and 5 financial investors. Next. From 5 different countries across ASEAN. Next. In very diverse sectors, including rubber, palm oil, mango, tea, pepper, and more, and covering very important topics like technology and supply chains, carbon credits, supply chain practices, and farmer engagement. Next. And the agribusinesses we're working with include small and medium enterprises, local enterprises, multinational enterprises, and financial investors. Next slide. You can see here the link to short videos that Grow Asia has produced to highlight 5 of the key case studies that have already been published on our website, and the remaining 10 case studies are coming very soon. So I do encourage you to take your phone and scan this QR code. We can also put the links directly in the chat for your reference. Next slide. We are also incredibly pleased to be working with private sector partners to pilot an ASEAN RAI scoring tool. This tool is being currently developed and tested in other parts of the world, including Africa, with agribusinesses that are focusing on more responsible practices. As you can see in the first icon, the scoring tool's purpose is to assess companies' compliance with the ASEAN RAI. It does provide a score, but it also offers insights into areas of perhaps gaps or opportunities that our partner companies might be experiencing in their supply chains. This scoring tool can be used by partners across a value chain from production all the way through to trading, but also even financial institutions that are looking for a way to conduct due diligence with companies in the agriculture, food, and forestry sectors. The tool also helps to identify areas of improvement for the companies that utilize it in both management and operational practices, and provides that score across different functions and activities so that you have that level of detail across every step of the company. And then last, but certainly not least, this scoring tool is built off of a series of other existing tools. We understand from many of you on today's call the requirement not to simply add to the list of existing tools, but to complement them. So we have done this by making sure that the scoring tool is already aligned to tools such as the IRIS Plus and the IFC performance standards. And we'd be very happy to take your questions on how you might be able to use this tool or how it aligns to any of your existing tools in breakout room number 2. Next slide, please. Last, but certainly not least, it's my pleasure to share with you a bit more detail about our work in Pillar 4. We understand from all of our speakers so far today that there's both a gap in the opportunities for investment, but also a knowledge gap about how investors, governments, and NGOs and CSOs can future-proof and de-risk investments to make sure that we're hitting our goals in environment, social issues, governance, and making financial returns. So our solution has been to create an accredited training program that fosters leadership and practical skills in sustainable investing in our sectors. Next slide, please. I'll give you a little bit of detail at this point about this learning and accreditation program, but I would also like to add that we encourage you to stay through until the end of today's event, when you will get a very special and exclusive opportunity to register your interest for this program first. But please do stay on the line, because we'll be sharing a very important and exciting update with you at that time. So when you join this program, you'll have access to 15 hours of e-learning modules, 2 in-person workshops, and be benefiting from content that is designed for ASEAN stakeholders and based in ASEAN. You'll also have the opportunity to connect with professionals that are facing similar challenges and maybe identifying solutions to those challenges from very diverse sectors. Our goal is to make this program applicable and accessible to any of you on today's call from any sector and any ASEAN member state. And then lastly, what you will gain, what you will grow from in this program. You will be able to learn to actually design, guide, and execute more sustainable practices in investments, understand how to apply those skills in your specific job scope, join a network of your fellow cohort members, access a wealth of resources and expert coaches that will guide participants in this program, and lastly, receive certification and accreditation from a reputable host institution here in the region. Next slide. The pilot for this program will be launching in September 2022, but as I shared, please do stay on till the end of today's program for the exciting details and the opportunity to register your interest for this learning and accreditation program. Next slide. I'd like to invite all of you to visit our website for more information on the scope of work that Ronald and I have just shared with you. You can reach out to both of us directly by the information on your screen. And if you scan the QR code that you now see, it will open up a list of resources that have been developed for you by all of the project partners, including the Food and Agriculture Organization, which you can access directly from this QR code and also on our website, both today and in the future. Last slide, please. Again, I would like to recognize the incredibly generous support from the donors, several of whom are in the room here with us today, from the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, from the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office of the UK government, and from the Government of Japan through the Japan ASEAN Integration Fund. Many thanks to those donors and all of you for supporting our work over the last 2 years, and many thanks for continuing to support that work as we move forward into the future. And I look forward to seeing all of you in our breakout sessions, where we'll be doing a deep dive into all of these topics and getting your feedback. Thank you so much. Back to you, Ping.
Thank you so much, Erin, for that wonderful presentation. And the date to watch is September 20, 2022 to come on board the pilot program. Do stay tuned until the end of our session today for your opportunity to join this. Thank you, Ms. Erin Sweeney and Mr. Ronald Eberhard, for sharing with us those key insights. And clearly we learned today about the enabling environment both IISD and Grow Asia are creating for all our stakeholders here to pivot towards inclusive finance for sustainable agriculture, food, and forestry sectors. We've also seen a very healthy exchange in the chat group, some of you asking questions. So for those who do have questions, kindly type them in and our project partners will respond as well in the chat box. Thank you very much. Now, before we proceed with our breakout sessions, let us all have a group photo. Kindly turn on your cameras, and we will be taking screenshots in several batches to accommodate all our attendees today. All right, let's have first batch. All smiles, please. In 3, 2, 1. Well done. And we'll move on to the next batch. In 3, 2, 1. Okay, I think this is another batch we have here. Everybody smile. Wonderful, lovely faces. And we still have another one coming up. 3, 2, 1, smile. Beautiful, thank you. All right, next batch. 3, 2, 1, smile. Lovely for everyone to be joining us here. Is that about it from our control room? Okay, and we're back. Thank you, everyone. At this point, we're now ready to open our breakout sessions. We have 3 breakout rooms that will be facilitated by a moderator covering a specific topic for a specific sector. Here are the breakout rooms and the corresponding topic, sector, and assigned moderator per room. Breakout room 1, topic, alignment, assessment process, embedding ASEAN RAI into the national context. The target audience are government, the target audience is the government. So if you're coming from the government sector, please do join breakout room 1. The moderator will be Mr. Ronald Eberhard, Associate Law Advisor, International Institute for Sustainable Development, IISD. We move on to breakout room 2. The topic is the ASEAN RAI, a tool to incorporate sustainability into business, policy, and practice. The target audience are private sector and implementation partners. Moderator will be Ms. Chris Abarha, Regional Programs Officer, Grow Asia. Last but not least, breakout room 3, topic is mainstreaming ASEAN RAI through actions of civil society actors. Target audience, civil society. Moderator, Emma Jessie McGee, Program Officer, Responsible Agricultural Investment, Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. I understand that your rooms have already been pre-selected based on your registration. You should be transferred to your assigned rooms automatically. For those who are not able to choose the breakout session they want to attend, please send a message to Secretariat 1 or Secretariat 2 in our Zoom chat and tell them which breakout session you would like to join so they will be able to transfer you to that room. All right, let's get that going. All right, good afternoon once again, ladies and gentlemen. And we would like to remind our participants to stay online until the end of our program so you can get an exclusive chance to join the pilot training program on the ASEAN RAI project. At this point, we're now ready to call in our moderators, who will be sharing with us relevant learnings, initiatives, and opportunities identified during the breakout sessions. And a gentle reminder that translations are available, so you could switch to the language you're most comfortable in for you to be able to engage more in this session and take the most out of it. Let us begin by calling our first moderator in, a law advisor from the International Institute for Sustainable Development, IISD. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Ronald Eberhard.
Thank you very much, Ping. We had a very thorough discussion at the breakout room number 1 on the experience of Indonesia conducting the self-assessment of the ASEAN RAI guidelines within their national context. During the breakout session, Indonesia shared their experiences. First of all, what is their institutional setup in doing the assessment, which ministries are involved, who are leading the process, as well as the timeline they set in order to complete and to initiate the self-assessment. And they are now on the second phase of the self-assessment, which we are happily will work with them again in doing the peer-to-peer review stage in the upcoming weeks and months. And from the experience of Indonesia, we have clearly learned that countries should be able to do this with very minimal support from the partners, because it within themselves, the burden of completing this process as well as implementing future reforms, which is not easy and obviously will require political will and mandate to achieve enabling environment for responsible ag investment. So in this regard, we kindly advise for countries who are embarked on the same process to be able to set on the back of their mind that they should be able to do this independently with a very minimal support from external partners. And I think from the experience of Indonesia, this is clearly the case, of which independent process are being done by the government of Indonesia, led by the Ministry of Agriculture, And hopefully within the peer-to-peer review process, we can work together to further identify what are the problems are and how we can resolve that for, at the end, implementing reforms that might be needed to achieve enabling environment for the RAI. And one of the key learning or takeaways from the process is the self-assessment that Indonesia did resulted in an increase of awareness of the ASEAN RAI among their domestic stakeholders within the key ministries that are involved, the key agencies, which is the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Investment, the Land Agency, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Environment. All together, they now learned about what ASEAN RAI is and what is relevant for them to do in order to assess their own regulations that are under their portfolio. So that's one key takeaway coming out from Indonesia's process. And the process itself is not without challenges. I think we all agree that this is something that difficult to do. Indonesia, I think, is having like 7,500 regulations in place at the moment, and they need to really look at which one are relevant for the ASEAN RAI, which are not an easy thing to do. That's why one of the challenges that they have identified is scattering of information related to their own laws and regulations. And the other impediment or probably an issue that impedes the process is the lack of a unit that oversees responsible agricultural investment. So they have the Ministry of Agriculture, but they also have the Ministry of Investment, which are two different ministries. And with the big bureaucracy, sometimes it's hard to have the same understanding and the same shared responsibility of investment policy in that sector. And the other thing that could also probably was transpired during the discussion was how you resolve differences, how you resolve different understanding within the ministries when you are doing this assessment process. I think what Indonesia did was to have this series of interagency meeting. They have like 4 or 5 meetings in the last 3 months to look into the ASEAN RAI Guidelines and international framework. And during the meetings, there was a certain deliberation, a deep deliberation of what they understand about Guideline 7, for example, like on climate change, what guidelines are relevant to it, and which are aligned and which are not aligned with the ASEAN RAI. So this really requires deep and frank discussion between the line ministries, which we do really think this is not easy to do. Coordination is still a very difficult thing to do, especially if your country has a very large bureaucracy. And the other thing that was transpired during the meeting was the intention to achieve this enabling environment for RAI was really strong for the countries that are doing the self-assessment, because they wanted to invite more or increase the number of FDI, a responsible FDI in the agriculture sector, which we have seen as the main motive, the main driving force for countries willing to undertake this kind of process by themselves, as well as to, in the end, to achieve the goal of that enabling environment. And I guess that's what were transpired during the discussion in our breakout room. The last thing I wanted to clearly mention as well is the role of ASEAN Secretariat, as well as the ASEAN mechanism that are in place that really put ASEAN RAI effectively rolling and being implemented as of now. I guess as the CFS Secretariat, Chris has mentioned, like ASEAN is a prime example of CFS RAI being translated into a regional guideline. This is certainly the case, of which we've seen that a regional mechanism like ASEAN are able to translate the CFSRI into a regional mechanism that is applicable and that is easily implemented with their existing mechanism. So I think having a strong institutional mechanism to implement this, which probably for some people who are not working in the government, from the private sector or from the civil societies, seeing that this is very bureaucratic, but if you do have this political support from the higher ups, from the minister, it will be much easier for the technical level to implement the ASEAN RAI guidelines into a very practical measure, such as new laws and regulations that are going to be implemented to implement the ASEAN RAI. I think those are the key takeaways from our breakout room. Thank you very much, Ping, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Ronald Eberhard. We've taken a lot of insights from you there. You mentioned that there are indeed large bureaucratic hurdles, but you also ended optimistically by saying that there is a strong intention for the adoption of ASEAN RAI in Indonesia. And hopefully that will be an example that, will rub off and be followed by the other countries here, particularly represented by their government representatives here. Thank you very much, Mr. Eberhard. And now we will proceed with the sharing of our next moderator, who is the Regional Programs Officer of Grow Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Criza Borja.
Thanks very much, Ping, and good afternoon again, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Would like to first extend our sincere thank you, of course, to our corporate partners in the region that has joined us in our breakout session, especially those that have shared their insights on our three main areas of work. Thank you to Song Saran, CEO of Emirates, Sanjeev Lewis, Investment Director for Southeast Asia of Sail Ventures, and Ms. Gisela Chongson, Executive Director of the Jollibee Group Foundation. These three partners have shared their insights into the three main areas of work for the private sector, which we have discussed in our breakout room, which includes, and I would allude to the earlier presentation as well, that includes our case studies, the scoring tool, and the learning program, which I know most of you are waiting for at the end of our session. Right, and that learning program is, of course, available and open for all different stakeholders. And in our breakout room, we did a quick poll at the beginning to just set the scene and understand what our partners in the region think when we say responsible investment. And three key words were highlighted that were sustainable, inclusive, and ethical. And these three words, along with the other definitions that our partners have kindly joined during our poll, were reflected in the insights from our partners in the region. And we are also, these insights are reflected in adopting responsible practices, particularly in existing investments, but also in investments that they're planning in the future. That includes a lot of social and inclusion activities as well, which were mentioned during our breakout. That includes farmer collaboration and the importance of having inclusion and responsible practices with smallholder farmers in particular, and how business practices should also be reflected in the practices of your smallholder farmers in the supply chain. Gender inclusion as well was highlighted, and also practices in local communities. And we've also talked about scoring tools, standards, and certification as well, and how there are different KPIs, different tools that are being adopted by companies and businesses in the region to relate to themselves or to be reflected as sustainable. So these are actually coming in together with designing a specific tool, for example, ASEAN RAI scoring tool, to be able to look into the different standards and different tools already available for agribusinesses, and how banks would perceive them in a sustainable finance perspective. And there is actually one of our speakers mentioned that lack of involvement of banks and the finance industry in sustainable finance perspective, and how tools like the ASEAN RAI scoring tool would hopefully be part of that process in responsible investments. And finally, we've talked about the learning program and how training and actually capacity development is an important tool in applying within the supply chain, and how to engage farmer groups, different groups like the farmer groups, financial investors, agribusinesses, and governments, and how blended learning approach has already been helpful to some of the supply chains in the region. And in connection to what Ronald has reflected on Breakout Room 1, there's also one particular message from some of our partners in establishing sustainable financing or green financing taxonomy frameworks that would be really helpful in looking into the standards like ASEAN RAI and other existing standards in the region, which can help them avoid duplication or confusion with maybe other regional or other global standards that are available. And regulators have the greatest leverage to drive adoption by banks and the corporate sector. So that's all actually from our breakout room, and would like to actually very quickly just share some of the activities to expect for the private sector and our partners in the region. We have our case study publication in this year, the remaining 10 agribusiness case studies and 5 financial investment case studies, as well as a B20 side event that you may email us and connect with us for more information, as well as the launching of the learning program and an investment inventory tool. So I think that would be very helpful for finance institutions, as well as our community of practice activities. So our partners in the region in the private sector can continuously join our community of practice, and we will have more activities on special topics like the one that we did earlier this year for the carbon in agriculture and forestry. Thank you very much. And back to you, Ping.
Thank you, Krisa. I indeed agree with you that the private sector has a very great influence in moving the needle that we need to be able to advance sustainable finance, inclusive finance for agricultural sectors. And it's really great to see that they're here engaged with us, because this can start in their very own value chains. So thank you so much to our private sector partners for being here. At this time, we'd also like to introduce our last rapporteur, who is Ms. Jenny Rose de Guzman, Program Assistant for Research and Advocacy, Asian Partnership for the Development of the Human Resources in Rural Areas, or Asia DRA. Ms. de Guzman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ping. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Magandang araw. I am again Jenny Rose de Guzman, Program Assistant for Advocacy and Research of the Asian Partnership for the Development of Human Resources in Rural Areas, or ASEAN. For the very productive and substantive discussion we had in our workshop sharing, specifically coming from the advocacy and capacity building on youths and women's access to responsible agri-investment, presented by ASEAN Secretary General Ms. Mags Catindig-Reyes, and another presentation from the CSO's actions on the ASEAN RAI and Lao PDR, presented by SAIDA Co-Director Mr. Tongdam Pongpichi. The following key points surfaced and important recommendations were drawn, which of course calls for further work and partnership with our CSO partners and stakeholders at the national and the regional levels. From the sharing, our CSOs highlighted the relevant action on ASEAN RAI. It depicts that national and regional CSOs have been very active in promoting RAI, especially in promoting youth and women's role in responsible agri-investments. It was seen through the conduct of 8 common initiatives. One is the case documentations. Second is the learning and training programs. Third is the research studies. Fourth is information dissemination. Fifth is on policy advocacy and lobbying. And the sixth is networking and experience sharing. And seventh, we have the promotion of SME roles in green products. And lastly, in the formation of technical working group, among others. It reflects that RAI is actually embedded on CSO strategies and initiatives, which is anchored on several global and regional development agenda, which includes the SDGs, the ASEAN Vision, and the UN Decade of Family Farming. This all also clearly depicts that the multi-stakeholder strategic partnership and participation will definitely help achieve the global and regional goals, especially with the participation and by putting the people's organizations at the driver's seat. But of course, still, these initiatives and the existing investments in agriculture are not enough to effectively reach our targets and meaningfully engage and empower our ASEAN youth and women in agriculture sector. Specifically, we noted that in the presentation, in terms of capacities, we recognize that there is a need to further capacitate our partners' people's organizations, such as in constructive engagement, in partnership building with public and private sectors, among others. There is also limited and or lacking in terms of policy environment, specifically in the investment. So there's a need in investing more knowledge sharing or information dissemination on RAI. There's also a need for more initiatives to address our policy and program gaps at the national and regional levels, as highlighted in the conducted scoping studies, and the need for youth-led organizations, mechanisms, platforms, providing services specific to youth in agricultures. In terms of programming and public investment, there is a need for integration of national and local initiatives of government and CSOs focusing on youth and rural women initiatives to ASEAN RAI principles. And there's also a need for a clear guidance and policies on land use. With these key lessons, we have identified some concrete actions and recommendations for our partners and stakeholders present for future work. One is the continued awareness raising on ASEAN RAI guidelines among our stakeholders, and importantly, cascading these to our partners on ground. The next one is to contribute to advancing, reviewing, amending our national policies and programs, supporting youth and women access in RAI. Third is investing in local action, supporting our youth and women in agri-entrepreneurship. And fourth, more national and regional learning exchanges on RAI, including models, policies, programs, etc. At the same time, we also have to continue engaging our stakeholders from private and public sectors and maximize the existing engagement in multi-stakeholder mechanisms at the country levels. It is also highlighted to have mechanisms for monitoring or social accountability on RAI guidelines implementation. And lastly, for all these to happen, we recommend that we need to continue this similar process as a regular regional multi-stakeholder mechanism for us to share and exchange models, policies, and programs on RAI. But more important is to ensure that the discussions and agreements at the regional level have concrete actions on the ground. This ends our presentation. We are grateful to FAO for supporting us and for this opportunity to further drumbeat our respective initiatives on RAI. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Ms. De Guzman. We have heard two important words there, youth and women empowerment in agricultural value chains. Thank you for giving that emphasis in your line of work. Now we would like to thank Ms. De Guzman, Ms. Borja, and Mr. Eberhard, of course, for their synthesis reports coming from the breakout session. And we are now ready for the next segment of our session today. The ASEAN RAI Learning and Accreditation Program will be launched in the third quarter of 2022. This training program is open to private, public, and civil society actors. To tell us more about this program, let's all watch this video presentation. There you have it. Learn, connect, and grow. Again, the ASEAN RAI Learning and Accreditation Program is scheduled to be launched on the third quarter of this year. For those of you who had stayed with us at this point, kindly answer the next poll as our exclusive offer for you to be among the first to register to join this cohort, this pilot cohort. So please, let's get ready with our next poll. The question is, do you want to join the pilot cohort of the learning program in September 2022? Number 1, yes, send me the application form. Number 2, yes, but I want more information. Please contact me. Number 3, maybe. Number 4, not at this time. Let's bring in your answers. All right, we're seeing a lot of interest here. The top answers are yes, send me the application form. Very well. Yes, send me some information. Contact me for more information. And that's well and good. We also have some maybes. We also have not at this time. We hope to be able to engage with you in the future. Okay, now that we have the answers in, thank you everyone, and Grow Asia colleagues. We will be in touch with you very soon for those who signified their interest. Very good. We've got 43% who said yes at once, and we've got 30% who said yes, send me the application. And the rest, we will be able to get in touch with you in the next opportunities to engage. If you missed the poll and want to learn more, please email Ms. Henrietta Retno, Assistant Program Manager, ASEAN RAI, at retno@growasia.org. That's retno@growasia.org. There you go. Thank you very much. Please do email Henrietta Retno Renwarin, Assistant Program Manager, retno@growasia.org to register your interest. Joining us now to formally conclude our program is a Senior Officer for Food, Agriculture and Forestry Division, ASEAN Secretariat. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Mr. Joseph Arbiol.
Thank you. Distinguished participants from the ASEAN Member States, our ASEAN RAI regional partners, representative from the private sector and civil societies, good afternoon. Dr. Min regrets very much not being able to join this closing plenary as he's still attending an equally important meeting. So please allow me on his behalf to deliver these closing remarks. First, we appreciate the convening of this ASEAN RAI regional event with various participants from government agencies, private sector, civil societies, international and regional organizations. Your presence at this event resonates the important role of multi-stakeholder engagement in advancing responsible investments in the region. I would also like to take this opportunity to express our gratitude to our regional partners for the cooperation, not only in terms of co-sponsoring this event, but also for the implementation of the ASEAN RAI Regional Action Plan. Ladies and gentlemen, ensuring food security remains high on the agenda of ASEAN. Climate change, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the ongoing conflict in Ukraine have revealed the vulnerabilities of our agriculture and food system. Increasing investment in agriculture sector is one of the means to ensure food security and eradicate hunger and malnutrition in the region. However, the growth in the inward flows of foreign direct investments in the agriculture sector of ASEAN has declined for about 30% over the past years. And currently, there's a renewed call to improve investments in the agriculture sector. Investment plays an important role in agriculture production as well as capital formation at the farm level. On the other hand, we do note that a poorly executed investment may also cause unintended negative social, economic, and environmental impacts in the region. taking into account the challenges and opportunities of the agriculture sector, the ASEAN RAI was developed to promote responsible investment that will contribute to the sustainable and inclusive agriculture investment while mitigating the negative impacts that may accrue therefrom. The objective of this event is to share an update on the implementation of the action plan, including the available tools to embed ASEAN RAI into the national policy of the ASEAN member states, as well as best practices and case studies on responsible agriculture practices. From our side, we are very pleased to note the progress made in the implementation of the ASEAN RAI action plan, and we continue to encourage our ASEAN member states, including our partners, to continue the excellent cooperation. We also note there are several recommendations from this event, among others, the importance of interagency cooperation in terms of implementing the alignment processes given the cross-cutting nature of the ASEAN RAI. Also, the need to encourage other AMS to continue with the alignment process of their respective national policy with the ASEAN RAI guidelines. Also, the need to look at the different standards in order to avoid possible duplication in terms of implementing the ASEAN RAI scoring tool. Also, the importance of the learning program in terms of promoting agricultural investments. Also, there's a recommendation on the need to encourage the engagement of civil organizations, farmers groups, and private sector to further advance the ASEAN RAI. Also, the need for continued awareness raising among raising of ASEAN RAI, particularly to those women and youth sector, and also to review the national policy in terms of access of women, youth, as in terms of agriculture investment, as well as to continue the multi-stakeholder engagement in terms of promoting the ASEAN RAI. So the ASEAN Secretariat will share these outcomes as well as recommendations to the ASEAN Technical Working Group on Research and Development, and hopefully these recommendations will be included in the report of the ATW Chair to some AMAF meeting this coming June for the consideration of our senior officials as well as for further guidance. Once again, thank you so much for your participation in this event.
Thank you very much, Mr. Joseph Arbiol, Senior Officer, Food, Agriculture and Forestry Division, ASEAN Secretariat, for ending this session on such a pragmatic and optimistic note. More collaboration is needed to promote ASEAN RAI and to enable us to achieve responsible investments into the agricultural and forestry value chains. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, our program has come to a close. Before we formally conclude our event, we would like to find out how helpful or informative this session has been for you. We value your feedback concerning our sessions. Hence, we ask you to take part in this final survey. Here it is, our final poll question. The question is, how useful was this session to you? Number 1, very useful. Number 2, mostly useful. Number 3, somewhat useful. And number 4, not useful. Please bring in your answers. Thank you very much. All right. Don't be shy. Please bring in your answers. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, at this point, we would like to thank our organizers, speakers, moderators, and our participants for joining us this afternoon for this ASEAN RAI video conference. This event is co-organized by the ASEAN Secretariat, GROW Asia, and the International Institute for Sustainable Development. The implementation of the ASEAN RAI Guidelines is supported by the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, and the Government of Japan through the Japan-ASEAN Integration Fund. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your cooperation. A pleasant afternoon at maraming salamat po.